Hi, everybody. Good morning to all our California folk and people on the West Coast. And good afternoon and good evening to everybody abroad or on the East Coast. We're really excited to have you guys today. I think it's going to be a really fun session. We've got a hot topic to discuss today. We're covering Azure Made Easy, practical steps to modernizing your IT. So I'm going to give everybody about a minute to come in and get settled in before we get started shortly. In the meantime, please feel free to say hi in the chat. Let us know your name and where you're joining from. As for me, my name is Kanisha, and I'm tuning in from beautiful Irvine, California, where our Trusted Tech Team office is based in. And I'm really excited to get started and to talk about something that I think a lot of people want to learn about. Oh, hi, Jesse from Virginia. Nice to see you in here. Cool. So I'm going to get started with some housekeeping notes before we get started. So first off, everybody is camera off and mute on, just so we can avoid any background noise and to make sure we can hear our speakers nice and clear. That said, we do want to keep this webinar super interactive. So we're going to leave about 15 minutes at the end for Q&A so that you guys can get any questions that you have in and speak with our speakers and get their expertise and guidance. So in the meantime, while we're doing our presentation, please feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A module. And if you have any comments, you can also use that chat function. And then we'll have a technical moderator on the side who will be answering those questions throughout. And then at the end, our speakers can talk to you directly about anything that you guys have. Next, our presentation is also being recorded. We're going to send the recording and the slides to everybody after via email, so keep your eyes peeled for that, so you guys will always have that. And then lastly, we're going to talk about some ways that we can help you with Azure at the end of the webinar. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to stay until the end. But cool, it looks like we have people from all over North Carolina, Wisconsin. Oh no, it's cold and snowy. I hope it's not too bad over there. Maryland, that's awesome. So yeah, I think this is gonna be really great. I'm gonna move into our agenda for today. We're covering a little bit of everything. We're gonna start with why businesses hesitate to switch to Azure and what you guys can do to kind of help relieve those hesitations. We have a live demo about moving to PaaS, so that'll be really fun and exciting. And then we're going to move into practical insights on infrastructure management, how to optimize costs. I know that's a really hot topic for a lot of you out there. And then lastly, how to get started in Azure. And we'll also share some resources for you so that you guys are armed and ready for that. So yeah, as you can see, we've got a really great session today. So let me please kick it off by introducing our panel. They're super fun. They're really great guys. I think it's going to be awesome. We have Principal Azure Architect Andrew Hill, and we have Azure Architect Andy Nolan. So they both have a lot of years of experience. I'm going to let them do the talking right now. And yeah.
Hey there, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Morning.
We're pretty excited to do this. This is our first time. Intros. I'm Andy Nolan, Azure architect here at Trusted Tech Team. Been in the CSP and MSP space for about 10 years, and most of that has been Azure related, from just a regular like engineering perspective all the way up to architecture, system design, and such. So super happy to get into this webinar today. And my friend Andrew Hill here.
Yes, hello, Andrew Hill. I've been working in IT now for about 25 years. Done all sorts of jobs from internal IT to owning my own company to working as a consultant to working independently, and then lots of MSP experience, and then also CSP. I did basically a full pivot to focusing on pretty much all of my efforts onto all things Azure around about 10 years ago. And it's been an awesome experience. So happy to do this today and share our experiences with everyone.
We will be primed for your questions is the takeaway there for sure. So we got a bunch of experience between us, and so hopefully we can be super helpful here. So let me jump into this right now. Why businesses hesitate to switch to Azure. So for most organizations, I think that you start with your on-prem infrastructure, traditional, AD file server. Maybe you have some application servers. Hopefully you have a backup server on site, but also somewhere else as well with the 3-2-1 rule. And so you have this. Why do you want to switch to Azure? I think that primarily the cost saving aspect is one of those. There's some sort of reverse negatives to that as well that I'll get into on the next slide here, but the cost is primary. Limitations with your existing architecture is another as well. You are bound by what you have on-prem at that point in time. Maybe you can go get some extra RAM from Micro Center, maybe this ECC, or you're going to have to wait a couple of days for shipping from Dell or HP. So depending on how fast you need to expand for capacity, you're going to be limited there. Whereas cloud, Azure in particular, this is built to be hyper scalable. You're going to have access to almost, or may as well be, infinite compute and storage and bandwidth and everything in between as well. And then also as well, there's the more advanced technologies that are available in the cloud as well. Like you could buy the pretty hardcore on-prem system, VMware or Nutanix or any of these vendors with all of these nice features. With the cloud, you can have these things baked into your infrastructure right out of the gate, maybe without having to necessarily have a pretty substantial like CapEx on like licensing and things like that. And then also as well, just in today's industry environment of talent, not a lot of folks still want to handle on-prem stuff. A lot of the focus is on infrastructure as code for the cloud, like computing environments. It's a little less fun and a little less interesting for a lot of up and coming engineers to be working on, a PowerEdge server in a 2-post rack in your office.
Many of the people that I work with nowadays, they have no idea, the history and also again how on-prem hardware even works. They wouldn't know where to start with a RAID controller, right?
Exactly.
Right. With hooking up a SAN.
There's
getting that capacity built out, building on a cluster of compute.
Dare I say it's a dying art?
Yes,
maybe.
Exactly.
Although I don't know if I miss it.
But there is a direct translation, like what you're doing on-prem. There is a one-to-one with what is going on in the cloud. They're just doing it for you, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's a good point, because our next slide here is why businesses hesitate to switch. And it's exactly really like a lot of the things that we just covered, like in reverse. The cost component is a big driver of wanting to look at going to the cloud. You have a hardware life cycle. You mentioned that you have a SAN. You have all the networking infrastructure. You've got 10 gig switches. Maybe you got 40 gig switching, right? Like there's a lot that goes into this, and it's expensive when you have to refresh and replace things. Obviously, it's perpetual spend in the cloud, but a lot less upfront. But also that cost component can be a pretty substantial reason to hesitate. A lot of people, or I'm sure everybody here has heard a story of some sort about runaway cloud spend. One day they get a bill from Microsoft or whoever for $30,000, $50,000, $60,000 when you're only expecting to spend $3 to $10 or something like that. A lot of these completely reasonable. Nobody wants an unexpected bill, right? And so like that ties into the perception as well around unpredictable expenses. That you have a hardware refresh coming up in 3 years or 2 years or whatever, and you can budget for that. The thought that you can't do that with Azure is valid, but it doesn't have to be that way if you plan things appropriately, which we'll get into in a little bit here.
Yeah, now I was going to say real quick also that having the right guidance from the right professionals to be able to guide you on your cloud journey will help prevent those unexpected spend.
Exactly.
But we have had some customers who've mistakenly, without their own knowledge, I guess, turn on very expensive things accidentally, and we have found that Microsoft can be very, very forgiving.
Right.
It has happened multiple times where they've forgiven a very, very expensive charge. So
that's nice of them. That's nice. And that actually that ties in perfectly as well here, which is the for as much as up and coming engineers maybe don't want to be working on on-prem stuff, your current staff, they may not be comfortable or may not be fully experienced with Azure. And so that's going to be a hesitation as well. And those examples that you just brought up exactly of like, okay, somebody going around clicking, enabling things and incurring unintended spend. So there's a lot of reasons there why businesses hesitate, but it doesn't have to be that way. The well executed plan is what you need to make these things go successfully. Being able to have an understanding of exactly what things what the pitfalls are, right? Like having somebody in your corner to be able to guide and provide recommendations, be that trusted advisor is valuable in any industry or with any platform, and especially with Azure that we happen to be pretty skilled in. That's where we can hopefully provide some value there. And so from the get-go, like you can lift and shift into Azure, and that is perfectly fine to get you there. But there has to be an interest and commitment in being able to refactor things. Like if you have an application server that runs SQL on-prem, if you move that one-to-one into Azure in a VM and you are running SQL on there, that's a huge missed opportunity. So moving that to something like SQL, Azure SQL DB, which is going to be a PaaS offering, platform as a service. That's a perfect way of refactoring something that you have on-prem and not bringing over, your baggage, let's say, from on-prem and continuing these trends. So like anything, it all comes down to the details and planning. If you have a good plan, it's going to reduce the detours that you might have to take along the way, and hopefully reduce some of those road bumps too. So that is my section here, and then I'm going to hand it over to Andrew. And we almost perfectly, maybe even intentionally, mentioned PaaS at the end of my slide there to lead into Andrew's.
Such a smooth transition. Wow, that was amazing. Yep. That was amazing. I am thoroughly impressed. Thank you for that, and thank you for the warm handoff, sir. So put together a little bit of a demo here just to kind of show what we would see generally on-prem, and also what it looks like to take that, not only to do it like a lift and shift, but also to do a refactor to a platform as a service. So let's get a little bit into what we've already been discussing, which is different cloud models, right? We've already been discussing on-premises, right? So you're going to have to manage soup to nuts, everything, buying all your networking equipment, buying all of your storage stuff, your SANs, your backup storage, right? Buying the hosts themselves that are going to host your compute, your RAM, and all that. Virtualizing all these things, which I hope you guys are virtualizing, not running bare metal. And then, managing your operating systems, patching, all the middleware that's going to connect all the different things, right? The runtime for your code, then the data itself, of course, then the applications you're going to run on top of that, and all the software licensing and operating system licensing as well, SQL licensing. So quite a lot to manage. Generally the life cycle I've seen typically is about 5 years. People will do their refreshes on all of that. And it could vary from, depending on the size of the company, 50,000 to, millions, right? So,
and that's just there's a human cost as well, right? Like I have spent many a night patching servers because you can't patch that stuff in the middle of the day, or hopefully you wouldn't, or you don't have to.
How about fixing a broken RAID controller and trying to bring a RAID array back online?
Exactly. There's
praying.
There's so there's like the practical capex on this hardware, but also as well like the operational cost of people that are needed to do these things out of hours, and it costs time and money, and so it's a lot to manage.
I'm having a bit of PTSD moment with flashbacks to a RAID array. Thank you. Whew. Okay, so let's move forward to the infrastructure as a service, right? So this is where Microsoft is going to start managing things for you, right? So this is normally what we call like a lift and shift. You're taking your existing operating systems, you're just not refactoring, but basically using the ASR utility typically to just bring it up into the cloud.
Azure Site Recovery.
Azure Site Recovery. Thank you. Not everyone knows these acronyms. Appreciate that. But you're still going to be managing the operating system. You might be bringing some ghouls and skeletons with you. Then the rest of it, right? The middleware, the runtime, your data and applications. So
still patching it at night.
You're still patching at night, yeah. Hoping not to blue screen on reboot. Yes. Okay. Lots to still manage on that on your part there. But it is a way to get your stuff up there, right? So at least at that point, you are protected from local disasters if your building catches on fire, floods, et cetera, right? And it does unlock the ability for people to work remotely much more easily in many cases. Moving over to the next column, this is where the rubber really starts to meet the road, in my opinion, and you really start to sort of like realize the dream. You are sort of making a commitment of sorts to Microsoft that you're like, hey, I'm going to host my I'm going to let you host all of my things, all of these different pieces, and then really all you got to manage is your data and your applications, right? So the people who are going to be working as developers on your apps and the data itself. So it tends to be much cheaper in many instances to run platform as a service versus running infrastructure as a service. And as far as scaling up, scaling out, those things become much easier as well. Then, of course, the column all the way to the right is going to be the software as a service. This is where all you need to do is just basically bring your data, right? And put it in there and then work with whatever pieces that they have to do integration. So this is going to be Salesforce. This is going to be 365. And then other, big SaaS companies and services.
Big fan of not patching on both of those models.
Yes.
I like
exactly. Obviously, the one drawback is you are completely beholden to them, their services running, and so it takes a little bit out of your hands as far as dealing with and reacting to outages. Whereas moving to the left, you do have more control, but it does get more expensive.
Sure.
Right.
But that's it goes with anything though, right? Like you could have a hot site or a cold site if you were on-prem on a data center. You could have another colo elsewhere, right? So it's like the concept remains the same, but again, you still have to procure hardware on-prem for those things, right? So at least this, should be a lower barrier of entry to be able to get the at least that N+1 model of like disaster recovery or even high availability depending on your needs, right? So good stuff.
Very good stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now, and I will. Oops, wrong button. And I'm going to share my screen and basically go through the little demo that I put together. I'm getting to some of the fun stuff here already. So what I put together is, like this would be a typical server that we might see on-prem, right? So it's got a few different services running on a few different roles. You got file and storage services where it's running IIS. Pretty standard stuff that we might see running, a Windows Server operating system. Maybe this is a customer, they've got their production site running here. They've got an FTP site running, right? Maybe they're processing like ETL data from like outside vendors. Here's their production site. Hello, webinar attendees. Yes, as you can see, I put together a very basic site, but imagining this is their production site that they're working off of as well. Like let's say maybe they have an instance of SQL running locally, right? That's functioning as a back end for this website. And then also another product, shout out Crush FTP, amazing product. Maybe they have this for their FTP services, right? And then just integration with database as well. So,
and I'm sure this is going to be pretty familiar for like a lot of the attendees here, right? Like I've seen hundreds, thousands of these sorts of servers where it's just Windows Server, file and storage, IIS, that sort of thing, right? Like this is everybody is going to have one of these, I'm sure, or close to.
It's close to, yeah. And then, the only variable really is going to be like what production app are they running? If it's not Crush FTP or something like that, it's going to be
QuickBooks. It's going to be,
oh goodness, yeah,
it's going to be a
Mass
variety.
90 or
Mass 90, exactly. Whatever your vertical,
Sage, right?
any vertical, everybody is going to have something similar to this in some variant.
Yes. So let's go and take a look at what I did as far as, again, what we could do, sorry, real quick, is we could just do a lift and shift with this, right? We could use Azure Site Recovery.
Yep.
We could replicate this machine up to Azure and then spin it up. Boom, it would work exactly the same. We could set up some network security groups.
Yep.
To manage access to to the production site, to FTP.
Yep.
And that would be a very straightforward solution. Done that plenty of times,
Sure.
right? But what we're looking for here is actually to make that transition to PaaS, right? So we want to go from infrastructure as a service to platform as a service. So
because the goal here is that I don't want to patch this server anymore.
I don't want to patch the server. I want to modernize my solution for my company. I want to make it future proof. So let's do that, right? So I basically took the code that I made for this this beautiful website. It's running in ASP.NET. So I took it, I made a few changes to it, right? Hey, Azure webinar attendees, hopefully if I publish this out right, then it's going to be working correctly in Azure, right? So I made that, and then I used a very basic method here. I just deployed it from Visual Studio, or from VS Code, directly to Azure, just doing the drop down here where you can actually publish it out, right? So that was the method I used there. And then for the Crush FTP, part of the reason why I chose that one is because it's pretty easy to Dockerize this. Shout out to Netlaw, who actually did the work here. I'm actually using his work. We're basically the source for the application is being containerized, right? So there's the Docker file itself, right? I made a few little changes here. Then there's the actual source for the application itself, right? And basically built an image from this, and then I pushed the image up to a container registry up in Azure, right? So that I could deploy that image from the container registry. So let's go ahead and go up there where I deployed that stuff to. So here is the container registry where I put this. And as you can see, got my little repository here. And I put you know what? We're using Andy's credentials. He doesn't have access to the repository, but you can take our word for it. It does exist in this repository.
And this is actually a perfect example of how using RBAC, role-based access control, is important.
Yes.
Because I don't administer this repository or any of this stuff, and so I shouldn't have access to it. So
Very
that's
true.
actually that's a whole deal around permissions, which is something to talk about too.
Yeah.
Is that it's like part of the journey once you move these things into Azure as well is to manage and maintain the permissions just like you would on a file share. So in this instance, I don't have access to this, and really it's not something that I work on, and it's not in my department, so why would I?
Exactly. I mean, it also goes to show that even if you have RBAC to the resource itself, the underlying things within the resource, like key vaults, right?
Yes.
Just because you have access to be able to see the key vault resource doesn't mean you have access to the secrets and whatnot contained within. You got to be a key vault administrator.
Exactly.
Same with storage, right?
Yep.
You wouldn't be able to see the storage that I posted up here either, because you can see the resource itself.
Yep.
But as far as having access to be able to see the underlying blob storage, you wouldn't be able to see that.
Exactly. And that's a huge thing that doesn't necessarily exist in a good fashion in on-prem stuff, right? Like you wouldn't really be able to segment out your resources in that way, other than not allowing logon from certain users to certain machines, right?
Yeah.
So in this instance, effectively, I wouldn't have login access to that VM that you showed earlier. But because I'm a domain admin or because I have whatever certain permissions, I would be allowed to log into that. Whereas at least with this, with Azure, with role-based access control, we can get so granular that I can be in an administrative capacity, but I still don't have access to that unless it's explicitly granted.
And that's really funny. I had a conversation with one of my good friends who works for a charity organization. They are stuck in an old mindset that, if you have your stuff local on-prem, that it's more secure. If you move your stuff to the cloud, it's, open season on your data and you can easily be hacked. And I've had these conversations many times with many people that actually by moving stuff to the cloud, you're actually using modern authentication methods, right?
Yeah.
You're able to implement conditional access policies. You can make it so things are only accessible from someone who has a managed device that is in compliance.
Right.
You can make things way more secure by putting it up here. And this ties back to the hesitancy to move to Azure. Some people have in their mind that, if it's on-prem, it's secure. When really you're actually using older authentication methods, it's actually in many cases can be more prone to having issues. And anyone who's ever been crypto locked and had to figure out how to work with Bitcoin to buy their data back can probably attest to that.
Yeah.
So
And not to say that you can't make on-prem secure.
Sure.
But that's another thing where it's like, okay, well now, it's dollars in to be able to get that outcome. And so it's makes cloud even more appealing.
Yes.
From a cloud perspective.
Actually, I'm going to go. So I'm actually going to go to the website. So basically, like I said, I published the website, right? Mm-hmm. So there's our webinar website. And just to kind of get into the settings for this, I published it, it's ASP.NET. So I had to do a Windows instance, right? For my app service plan. I can bind a custom domain to this for whatever my presence might be up in the cloud very easily, right? So whatever domain name I'm trying to represent. As far as doing custom certificates for that domain name, I can easily add that in there. And as you can see, there's my website. Again, modified for all to see here for our webinar attendees. The other thing is, I deployed this from VS Code, but there's many other ways that you could deploy this, right? Again, from a repository, you can also I can set Azure DevOps, have some pipelines, have multiple versions being deployed, to deployment slots, and that's something that I also set up here with the Crush FTP as well, right? Where we deployed. Our deployment center here, and as you can see, there was logs last time I looked at this, but I guess it's not showing it now. I can do. We can look at our log stream. We can look at our log stream with what's going on here. There you go. And then also getting into deployments we were talking about earlier. I can have a development deployment slot. I can have staging, right? We could separate this out into different subscriptions. There's lots of different ways you could do this, but at a basic level, you can have different deployment slots. I can swap between them if there happens to be an issue with deployment, right?
So let me ask you then, being as though I got a bee in my bonnet about patching here, new version of this comes out.
Oh,
what do we do?
Well, that's actually a good point. So I deployed this one. It's it was a slightly older version.
Yep.
And look, it's got update available. So doing this, I could actually build in to the code itself to pull from a newer version, build an image off of that.
Gotcha.
I can deploy my new Docker image, and it'll be updated. And then basically it'll work with the persistent storage that's already there. I won't lose any of my settings.
And then what? That goes into the dev slot. We can test it, and then we swap.
Yeah, I can go to the dev slot and then stand that up, make sure everything works, and then after we are sure that nothing is going to catch on fire, then we can move it to production, right?
Nice.
Yeah. So there's lots of options here, and then of course we can scale up for demand. We can scale out for redundancies. We can make this geo redundant.
Right. And that's the scale out part, or scale up and out is pretty important there. So scale up would be like whatever size this is right now. This is a premium P or premium V3, so P0 V3.
Yep.
So 4 gig of RAM, and then you can whatever like quota or CPU cores there are. But scaling up is like changing the compute capacity of the thing, so more resources.
Yep.
Scale out is to make more of them available, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And so I suppose the value here in the context of what we're looking at with Crush FTP or with this ETL thing, or if it was doing EDI or whatever, but seasonal business, let's say, right? You have increased demand, increased capacity, multiple people hitting this site or sending files or retrieving files only for a certain period of the year.
Yeah.
Scale it out for what, a month or two, and then the rest of the year you can scale it back to a smaller footprint, and then that's going to be your price savings, right? Like versus if you were on-prem, you're stuck with what you had.
Yep.
Maybe you would need to buy, like, that one month of the year where you had increased demand, maybe that warrants having to buy more resources or additional, like an additional unit or something like that.
Yeah.
But with this, you're able to scale it for a brief period of time and then pay for it. And then the rest of the year, don't have to spend unnecessarily on extra resources that aren't being used.
Very true. Very true. And then also using managed identity, we can tie, again, SQL backend to this Cosmos.
Yeah.
Lots of ways we can tie this out. And then also the other reason why I chose Crush FTP, again, you can containerize it.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take it to the next level. You could use container apps. You could do it for Kubernetes.
Yeah.
And just unlock all kinds of possibilities there for scaling, right?
Right.
And then redundancy as well.
Yeah.
So, getting more into discussion around like container apps and Kubernetes, much deeper discussion there. And I think we could do a whole webinar just on those as well. But if you wanted to basically take it to the next level, that would be some of the technologies that you would implement. And again, if I suddenly said, hey, on premises, I need you to stand up some Kubernetes clusters, right? Yeah, good luck. I'd
go to Azure.
Yeah, exactly. So, but doing it up here in Azure, just a much easier venture. I mean, then the tough part is just learning Kubernetes and how to work with that.
Step one, learn.
Step one, learn Kubernetes. There's actually there's a little animated film
that is,
I recommend to you guys. Look it up. Yeah. So anyways, this is basically the demo, and let's go back to slides. We can keep talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
All right.
Sharing. There we go. And then we got to re-share the deck.
There it is. And I think we're on slide
something.
10.
Love that Azure is like no brainer, but the screen sharing is a issue for everyone.
Very tough. Very tough.
Eternally complex.
I'm gonna go home and study this tonight, actually. Thank you. So anyway, so now we've got our stuff up in Azure, right? We've converted it to PaaS, and life is amazing, and we're already starting to realize the dream.
I get to sleep at night now. No more patches.
Wow, that's great. I look forward to that as well. So let's talk about again, management of our infrastructure once it's up there, because we're going to want to have a way to have visibility on what we have up there, keep a running inventory. We're going to want to make sure that we have policies in place, right? If maybe we have compliance standards that we're trying to meet, with HIPAA, FINRA, et cetera. We want to make sure that we are taking all those things into account, depending on what kind of business that the customer is in, right? And then also, of course, with the resources that we have up there, we want to make sure that we are protecting our investment, right? Yes. So we want to talk about, what is return to operation going to look like, having a plan for that. For our critical infrastructure, stuff that's not in dev, stuff that is production facing. We really have to plan for this, and then also be able to know what to do and react should something occur.
Yeah, having an actual backup and disaster recovery plan for your business in general is super important. The Azure component of this is critical as well. But if you just have that part and then you don't have an entire business continuity plan, you probably figure that out.
Yeah, basically, just because you move your stuff up there doesn't mean your problems are solved. It just means you have different problems.
You have the ability to solve.
I would argue better problems.
Yeah, better problems.
Gold-plated problems.
Yeah, exactly.
So Yeah, so obviously you want to try to be able to see things coming wherever possible. So building out dashboards is a great way to do that, where you can have your log data coming from your different apps, from your databases, feeding into like a log analytics workspace, queries based off of that, and build out widgets to basically help you visualize that, so you can see at a glance like, oh, okay, we have traffic that is exponentially increasing. What's the reason behind that? Maybe you have security tied in there as well. Like, okay, why are we suddenly getting all sorts of
like failed logins or
failed login? Yeah, weird. Maybe somebody's trying to brute force something.
Well, it's interesting here as well. It's like being that, like, for me in particular, and I know you as well, for like MSP space and such, like a lot of our life revolved around dashboarding out of our RMM tool. I'm sure many people on the webinar here have like some experience or use like some type of RMM, like Ninja as an example is one, Enable, and many others out there. And the reporting and insights kind of like not super great, or like you're gonna get basic stuff, right? Like you get like uptime, you get general like CPU usage, RAM utilization, like if you have an Exchange server, you see like back pressure and all of those meters and all that stuff is this kind of whatever. But with PaaS offerings in Azure, with things like this, with the visibility dashboard, these services that are baked into Azure, you're getting so much more insight and visibility into the underpinnings of what's going on here. That previously, like with an RMM on a server, you wouldn't have really any visibility into that unless you went ahead and set up extra stuff. So that's that. I think that's probably like a really important thing to note there, as well as like in many cases you're going to get enhanced visibility compared to what you have to normal,
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically choose your own adventure based off of what you're trying to find. So if you're trying to like, hey, I'm trying to figure out what HTTP 400 errors are coming up, right? And how many, and are they occurring when my Kubernetes pod is increasing the number of nodes, right? Something like that,
right? Because previously at best you'd get like what, through the event log, maybe.
Oh, going through Windows event logs and things like that? Yeah.
That's right. Even an RMM tool, right? You can like fish out certain things, but it's not fun.
No.
I don't like that.
No, and again, there's things that are baked in here that once you know how to access them and query them, it's a total game changer. So let's talk a little bit about the compliance end of things. So we want to make sure that we don't have people, the wild west. If you have a lot of hands in the pot, let's say you have a big IT team, you don't want people going and changing things, doing things willy-nilly.
Yep.
So having a policy in place, or policies, I should say, is going to be paramount. Especially again if you're trying to meet some sort of compliance standards, making sure that you have Azure disk encryption. Maybe you have personally identifiable information. Say that 3 times fast. For HIPAA compliance, right? So you need to make sure you have like transparent data encryption. You need to have customer managed keys, right? Additional layers to make sure that the data is protected, beyond what Azure offers out of the box. You want to have policies in place to make sure that if people are standing things up, that it's being enforced, right? So maybe they try to stand something up, they're getting some sort of error message like, hey, in order for you to stand this up, you need to do these things. Right. And then, so you hear, I brought up a dashboard of, policy, and you can see who's in compliance, who's out of compliance. As you can see, that's a very big red ring. So we'd have
very non-compliant.
Very non-compliant at this point. So there'd be certainly lots to do and lots of people to talk to in this regard. Yeah.
And there's a lot of baked in things with Azure, like pre-built based off of certain things, right? There's going to be stuff covering like, or at least as best as it can, like things like HIPAA or like general, like more generalized stuff. But then there's also specific templates around like, if you're in the CMMC space, right? Like you do defense contractor stuff, like DFARS and all of that compliance requirements there, or NIST 800-171 or 80-171. It's been a minute since I've got that, but there's a lot of like pre-baked things that'll you can fine tune and tweak depending like what you need to worry about specifically, but you don't have to invent this from scratch.
No,
Right.
no, yeah, exactly. There are many templates that are there for your assistance. You can just look them up and apply them.
Perfect.
For sure.
Cool.
All right. So protecting and recovering your investments, right? So we want to make sure, let's say we have instances like if you happen to do the infrastructure as a service thing, right?
Yep.
Then you may want to have Azure Site Recovery to go from one region to another. So that way you could literally have your hot site ready to go. Right.
Okay, so again, it's those concepts, right? The same stuff from on-prem. You have a hot site or you have a cold site or whatever, but like you have the availability to do that in Azure, different regions. Exactly.
And as long as you have your DNS set up correctly,
right.
Which we had to help one of our customers with, where they didn't have their ASR set up correctly. So DNS, very important.
There you
usually the root of all of our problems.
Yeah, there's a haiku and it involves DNS as the problem. Always.
Yes, the haiku. Yes, look that up, everyone. So yeah, having that in place, and then also again for your like web apps and things that we've been working on so far, there's stuff built into Azure where it's automatically backing up your site. It's going to get, and then let's say with SQL, right? It's going to give you like point in time restores where you could restore to 5 minutes ago very easily.
Yep. And that's it's important point as well with this too, because Azure has obviously this is like the native recovery services vault in Azure, but it supports a lot of third-party tools, and there's a lot of third-party tools that can exist entirely outside of this as well. And I think they all kind of have their place. Like a big fan of like a Veeam and Barracuda, where these vendors have like their own like native implementations and how they operate with Azure. But depending on your needs, like there's a compute component required with those, and so like it's not going to be for everybody. And something that in particular I love about Recovery Services Vault is going to be you don't need to provision any extra compute or pay for any hardware. You're really just paying for the storage of having that stuff available in another region. Maybe if you wanted to have all the infrastructure prepped and ready to go, you could have it there and you just pay for that. And then if something happens, you turn it on and things are good to go, right? Like for the hot site kind of stuff. So it's important to note too that like compared to on-prem, you don't have to duplicate all of that infrastructure by putting your dollars into prepping for that. You only pay for the storage in an additional place, and then hopefully it never does, but if the time comes, it's going to be ready and available for you. So, and also as well, make sure when you folks do have these things that you test them, because having backups and a DR site that you have never tested or dry ran means nothing, truly.
Yeah.
It effectively doesn't exist, because when you need it, it will not work.
If you have not tested your backups, you do not have backups.
Yes.
Period.
100%.
Yep. All right. So let's talk about optimizing, right? So these is conversations I get brought into pretty much on a weekly basis around here. So optimizing, to be clear, optimizing, we try to veer it towards equaling savings, right?
Yeah.
But in many cases, it can also mean spending more money in different areas to make sure that you're getting an optimal end user experience, right? Whether it be for your internal users or for your customers.
Of course.
So,
because that's the whole point of us moving up there, right? We don't want we're saving money, and now we want to continue to make sure we're not wasting money.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure we're not wasting money, but we don't want to have a dip in end user experience, right?
Of course.
Otherwise, you're going to have your offices full of people saying, "Why did we move to
Azure?
You moved to Azure, yeah, and my life is terrible ever since, and I blame you." So
exactly,
we want to
nobody wants that.
Yeah, we want to help you avoid those conversations with your end users. So we are here to help. So, when it comes to actually moving up to the cloud, we want to get our teams in place. We want to make sure people are well educated on the ins and outs. We've already started touching down on them today, but we want to make sure that you have your staff who can use the information that we've given them, be educated, and also be the people who can speak to it. So, when it comes to your setup, wherever possible, you want to try and make sure it's future-proof. By moving to PaaS, that's going to be a good start. When it comes to budgeting, you're going to make sure that you have alerting in place, making sure that if there is budgeting anomalies that you're alerted, right? going to want to make sure that you have your team, what they're going to do to react to that if that should occur. And same goes for over allocation, right?
Yeah, that's probably one of the largest things, right? Where it's like, and it's usually, I assume that sort of like lift and shift model, but it was never refactored or really looked at other than the initial move, right? So you dump something up into Azure, and it's just in the state that it was there, even though it could be less than 1% utilized on average.
Right. Yeah. Where the CPU sitting idle for, but it's got 64 cores and
a
bunch of RAM, because you basically took what the Azure Migrate utility said at face value, and it's like, okay, just
there's a little
pass it on through.
There's nuance, and there's just a little bit more like in-depth review needed on these things.
There is. Sure. Yeah. And so again, having a budget, having a team is going to be good. So let's talk about the tools, right?
Yep.
So Azure Reservations basically means that you are going to commit to Azure for these compute instances or storage. It's going to be you're going to commit that you're going to be using it for 1 or 3 years, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to give you a huge savings on that. It can be up to 70% in cases where you're doing a 3-year plan.
And that's because we're helping out Microsoft, or rather, you're helping out Microsoft when you do a reservation, because that helps them do their hardware refresh lifecycle. Where we're talking about worrying about replacing your on-prem stuff, they want to know what the commit is, so that when they have to spend a couple of $100 million refactoring or refreshing a data center, they know how much capacity they need to refresh right there, or what they need to add. So
right,
that's it's why they're willing to give that discount, because they're in it for the long haul, and if you are as well, they'll pass that along.
Yeah, I'd say Reservations is the one that we end up working with most often. And then, another one would be, let's say you have developers, they're working on machines. These machines are more or less disposable. They're just using them for testing.
Yeah.
Then in that case, you'd want to do spot instances, right? So basically, spot instances means that these machines, if the data center reaches capacity and they need them, your machines will be knocked offline so that other people can use them, right?
Yeah.
But you save 90% on it, because otherwise these resources would be unused in the data center. So you get a really good deal on these. So if it's
not mission critical, you're just doing a thing, a developer, you're just testing something,
running some batch jobs, and you don't want to use the batch PaaS service, then this would be the way to do it. So
cool.
Then there's Azure savings plans, right? Where you're basically committing to a fixed spend, where Azure reservations are for the resources themselves. Azure savings plans are committing to a spend.
So that's going to be, again, maybe not exclusively, but more on the developer side of things, where it's you got a bunch of people, or even during testing, right? You're doing a bunch of stuff. You don't know what you're going to pick. You're going this SKU size or that SKU size. So you're committing to the compute rather than the SKU itself.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, then the last thing we want to talk about a little bit, and we touched on it a little bit earlier, is infrastructure as code, right? So let's say you have an environment, and you know what your production environment is going to look like. You've sort of defined what your landing zone is for a particular project that you're working on. Landing zones, a whole other thing that we can get into. That could be a whole webinar on its own.
Right.
But basically, you have your pre-baked recipe, right, for what an environment's going to look like for your production, for your development, and for different projects that you happen to be working on. You can use infrastructure as a code to make sure that is repeatable and predictable, and that your costs are going to be consistent. And then also you can have third-party add-ons for Terraform, for instance, where it'll tell you if you make a change to your code and you're going to update the state. It'll tell you how much your cost is going to increase on the fly as you're updating your code, which is kind of cool.
That is really cool.
Yeah. So
pressing enter has never been more expensive.
Certainly. So I think we've kind of touched on that. We could definitely do a whole webinar on cost savings, but I think we're running out of time, so we'll move on to getting. So, anyways, if you want to get started on your Azure journey, I'd say one of the first things, although I'm quite biased, is I would say call a trusted tech team, call Andy or myself, and we could definitely give you more color on what we've already discussed today. It'd help you on your journey, and
part of getting started as well is okay, well, here's what some of our other customers have said as well. Like, I think that we love to work with anybody that is interested in Azure, in that journey, figuring out like what is the, like we have many customers that we have like regular standing meetings with around improving their environment, like fostering their adoption of moving to Azure. And those are some of the most enjoyable calls that I think we have, because it's like week after week, there's, like there's improvement, there's cost savings, there's, it's like to be able to guide people down the right path, or at least the right path for them, is really, really valuable. I like that a lot.
Yeah. So we provide consultative services is just one of the packages that we offer. And then also if you need professional services done where you need us to do a project for you end to end, we also provide those services as well.
Yeah. Even with the end to end stuff though, like it's always like a teach a man to fish kind of approach, right? We're not interested in gating how the sausage gets made for the pro services. So like we will teach, and like the whole way, like a team is absolutely fantastic.
Absolutely. Well, it's documentation, good process handoff, making sure, because a lot of the companies that we work with are actually very large companies, so they already have their own IT teams.
Right.
So it's just us making sure that they have the tools and what they need to continue on and carry the torch and continue to prosper in Azure. So
exactly.
And then otherwise, there's if anyone listening already has a presence in Azure, we are tier 1 CSP, so we do offer Azure subscriptions. In many cases, we get discounts, and we're able to pass along the discounts to customers. And not only that, but as a tier 1 CSP, when it comes to helping provide additional support for those resources in Azure, that's something that we offer as well.
Absolutely. All right. I love it.
Awesome. That was amazing, guys. Thank you. So as you guys can see, these guys live and breathe Azure. They know it like the back of their hand. So if you guys need help with anything, you can click that link on the screen right there and get a consultation on Azure, or you can learn more. We also do have an upcoming webinar, and it's going to be an AMA with our pros on all things M365 and Azure. So you can continue the conversation over there. Right now, we do want to jump into some questions. I've seen a number of questions in the chat and Q&A. If you guys have questions, please leave that in the Q&A module, and we'll get to those. And anything we don't get to, we can reach out to you guys and answer those for you. The first one from Chris I see is, how does networking work with Azure? I.e., I run all my Active Directory servers. How do they talk to my endpoints? Or I'm running an SMB that all users need access to file shares.
Yeah, I love it. So basically, the way that we can work with that is you can set up a virtual network gateway in Azure, right? Have a tunnel to your on-prem, and then have your SMB traffic travel over that. So that's actually one of the most common scenarios that we run into, where you have people running on-prem, you have SMB file shares, and you either want to move those up so that they're available, and again, for remote users and whatnot. So that'd be one. And then another thing, as far as moving to PaaS, would be Azure Files, right? So done transition. Done transitions for that as well.
And then bonus points as well, depending on, so just a regular, site-to-site VPN with the virtual network gateway, but depending on what like UTM or like firewall like that you have on site, Cisco Meraki or SonicWall, or just like a Cisco Firepower, whatever you have. Palo Alto and stuff, the majority of vendors today have Azure Marketplace offerings where they have a deployable firewall, essentially, right? That you stick into Azure. And so, it's treated just like a firewall. You access it like you would your on-prem firewall. And so, if you wanted more of the familiar sort of experience, let's say if you're using Palo Alto's on-prem, you could deploy Palo Alto in Azure, and then you could just get your site-to-site tunnel however you would normally want to, like if you have like certain preferences or keys or whatnot, like it's the same UI, the same hardware effectively, or the same software effectively, and you can get those things hooked up that way. Otherwise, though, if you just want a regular site-to-site tunnel, Virtual network gateway is super fine as well.
Just extend your network.
It's really comes down to a cost component or depending on how important like the security layer of things are, right? Like if you want like a full IDS, IPS and everything with your firewall, and you want to route all your traffic through that, like if you have like extra licensing and such, there's a bunch of different ways to do it. But those, I would say, primarily, yeah, first stop would be your virtual network gateway to just get connectivity. But then if you have something specific like vendor wise with your firewall and you want to extend that, then there's almost certainly going to be options there.
Yep, absolutely.
Cool. Good
Cool.
question.
The next one that we have from Jesse is, how do backups work with Azure? We currently use Veeam. And as a follow-up to that, I'm personally curious, how do you know when you're moving to Azure what size your VM should be?
Okay, so I mean, I get so two parts really. Veeam itself, they have full support with Azure. There's a couple of different varieties though. If you just need to use Azure as like as a scale out backup repository, or just as backup repository in general, you can use blob storage. I think maybe they even added Azure file storage, but I'm not too sure about that currently. But blob storage specifically, you can just add that as a repo for your backups, and then you can just take your backups locally on your local on-prem device, and then you can seed and mirror that stuff up into Azure. But they also have offerings as well if you want to do the full like the replication side of Veeam backup and replication, where you can deploy similarly as I mentioned with Andrew in the with like the firewall side of things through the Azure Marketplace. You can deploy the actual like another Veeam BNR instance, and what you can do there is get that all hooked up with your Azure infrastructure to do like the full availability replica kind of stuff, and then everything stays in sync. They do like the WAN accelerators and stuff if you need like bandwidth enhancements and whatnot, like with compression. But they have the full featured set of stuff available. However you want to deploy it.
At one of the MSPs I worked for, we had a centralized Veeam repository for our customers, right?
Right.
Where basically it wasn't just for one customer, but like
doing the cloud repository or the cloud. Exactly.
So just it gets pretty awesome.
Definitely. And then for the sizing for the VMs, Andrew kind of touched on this a little bit.
Oh, yeah.
And that's sort of like just broader in general. When you're moving, Azure Migrate is probably going to overestimate. And so I would say Azure Migrate, take what they say first. But once everything is in Azure, have that sort of like 30-day review or sooner, maybe,
baseline,
like to see where, see what your usage is, and then sort of just commit to taking a look and optimizing like after you've got that baseline of usage, because it is and I understand why it does it, right? You never want to undersell or underspec something, but following up after the fact is very important to see what your usage is.
So you're using Azure Monitor to take a look, and
Azure
then
Monitor,
and then excuse me, and then also gauging end user experience as well, which is it's a bit fluid, but generally what I like to do, like Andy said, get things in, have that baseline, see how people are feeling about their experience. Right. Because that's really, at the end of the day, that's what matters, right? Is you can look at your metrics, but if people's end user experience is not good, then but if their end user experience is fine, then we start lowering down the SKUs. Right. Exactly. And then also, let's say the disks themselves, we can take it down from a premium to a standard SSD and see if it's still performing fine for those functions.
Bunch of levers to pull, right?
Exactly. If it is, then we can just keep doing that.
Cool.
Cool. And last question. I want to be respectful of everybody's time, but Adam said, "Hello, everybody. Great presentation. Thank you, Adam. I have a specific Azure Synapse question. Are all activities in Synapse pipeline considered the same? E.g., if else set variable, SQL script, etc., are they all billed in that per 1,000 activity runs, or are there some activities for free?"
Ooh. Yeah. So I was gonna say, if you're running things with serverless SQL, right? Basically, anytime you're hitting that, it's chargeable thing, right? Other than that, you're charged for storage.
Yeah,
So,
there's also extra layers there though, like for your integration runtimes, if you're using the pre-baked ones,
yeah.
there are because there's a free component there, but like if you have longer running jobs built in like certain increments, and so like we use Synapse ourselves, and so the bill is generally like formatted with a laundry list of different usage types of like integrated runtime on a managed VNet. We have some things that are running directly on like deployed resources. So like we have an actual like VM resource that we use for like processing like certain kind of jobs and stuff. This is really a question that I don't think we can appropriately answer in the way that it needs to, like in like the short time that we have there. So I'd love to, if we could like follow up and get a little bit more context there as well, because it's just like there's a bunch of stuff to that. So I'd love to know more. I want to give like the best answer that we can. So
Yes, I left you with generous 60 seconds there, so that makes a lot of sense.
thank you, Kanisha. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you everybody for tuning in. We are unfortunately at time, but I know that I had a lot of fun, and I know you guys were doing an amazing job explaining all things Azure. So thank you guys for coming in. Thank you to Andy and Andrew for giving us your time. We do offer Azure consultations. We can help with everything. These guys have seen it all, from implementation, optimization, all that licensing, everything. So feel free to click that link if you guys need a consultation or if you want more information. All the Asians. And then also we do have an upcoming webinar where you can ask more of those questions. So please feel free to register for that as well. That'll be December 19th, 8 a.m. And thank you. That's everything we have for you guys. We will send a recording out. That has been a very popular question. And we'll also have those slides in there so you guys have all the information. But other than that, we hope you guys have a really awesome rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.